everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of Team Lead Talks. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Courtney Atkinson to the show. Welcome, Courtney.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, Courtney, you're actually, I believe, not to fact check this, but you're my first Canadian guest that I
All
had.
right.
Yeah.
Little happy dance for Canada.
Yeah. So what part of Canada are you in?
I'm in Western Canada, so most people have heard of the Rocky Mountains and oftentimes Calgary. So my hometown where I live is just south of Calgary called Lethbridge, although I have an office in Calgary as well, but I live in Lethbridge.
Cool. Well, kudos to you for being the first Canadian guest. I think that's pretty awesome. We're
Thanks.
international now, I think.
Yeah,
So that's pretty cool. So, Courtney, the idea obviously behind the show is to learn from different people around North America now,
Mhm.
not just the United States, about how they got started in real estate. So, can we kind of just hear, obviously, like, we'll ask some more intrusive questions about your team and how you got started, but give us
Sure.
the how you got into real estate story.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty straightforward. I have a background in university administration, so I was doing an MBA in finance and marketing, and then that segued into university administration. I did curriculum development at the University of Lethbridge, and then was seconded to go over and work in human resources. So I did that for about 3 years and was doing faculty recruitment there, began building out an office, hiring staff, and then onboarding and hiring, I think at that time, maybe 30 or 40 different faculty members from across the world. And during that time, of course, I was also working with the different faculties, interviewing different faculty members for positions on campus. And so I had a chance to meet a lot of different people. And then as these people were hired, then it was the matter of, getting them immigrated, helping their partners find work, helping their kids find schools, and then eventually passing them off to a real estate agent to help them find a home. And, by the end of that, I think
Yeah.
second year, I had done some math on my referrals and kind of asked around a little bit, and seemed like these realtors were making more money than me. And it was also at a time where I was becoming a little bit disenfranchised with the upward mobility that I had in that role. And
Yeah.
so I got my real estate license and just started part-time with a team in 2008, about May. And then things went well enough that I thought I could replace that income and went full-time January of 2009.
Awesome. That's a great story. We'll come back to the part about how in your prior real estate life or career, recruiting and training might have helped you in your real estate career. But so you made the transition, which I also did. I was in a government role, HR kind of position too, where we would onboard and I learned systems and processes and the importance of SOPs and playbooks. So
Yep.
that was a big learning experience for me as well. But let's flash forward. Okay, you made the transition. Where did how did you decide where to hang your license? And then did you hire a coach? Did you do it on your own? Walk us through the first year and
Yeah.
ultimately up to where your first deal came from and how you handled it.
Yeah. So a little bit of background on that. So my parents, were both teachers, had some education. And so I've always believed in education, but I've also used it a bit as a crutch to kind of defer decision making. I've since gotten over a lot of that. But back in those days, in order to build my confidence up to feel like I could do this in real estate, what I did was I read literally 25 books about real estate sales and business building, and did that for the entire, I think probably like 6 months, maybe before getting licensed.
Okay.
And one of those books was MREA, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. And it just kind of seemed like a logical thing to do. Not that I saw anything wrong with being a traditional real estate agent, but it just seemed to me to be a good trajectory. So I kind of had that in my mind. I wasn't really sure that it would work for me or that I could do it. So I joined a team and had that predictability of leads and opportunity, did that for about a year and a half, and then ventured out on my own sometime in my second year, probably by about 2010, 11, something like that.
Cool. So just out of curiosity, so you kind of approached it with like you wanted to learn and educate yourself before officially making the transition
Yeah.
from your time period of however long it took you to read all those books. Is that what kind of prompted you to not just start as a solo agent, but to join a team?
Yeah, to a degree, I wanted to see what teams looked like, from the inside. And at that time, this was a team that was tops in my market. There was a team leader and one agent, but that was quite a thing back 15 years ago.
Yeah.
They had, I think, one admin person, maybe two at that point, and selling over 100 houses. And so, that was a huge thing. And so, yeah, it was a confidence builder. It was an opportunity delivery mechanism. And I
Yep.
also, I think had the sense that if I was going to be making lots of mistakes, which I anticipated that I would, it would be better to be making them in somebody else's business rather than on my own. And at very least, I'd have a greater chance of generating some income. So I was really pleased that I had that opportunity, and I'm really glad that I took it. And I recommend that to a lot of different people, because I just didn't, despite being 34 and being an adult and having lots of professional experience, this was a new game for me, and I just
Different
felt
game,
like
man. Yeah.
I felt like I just needed that additional support, and I'm really glad that I did that.
I always regret, and I always tell this to everyone I speak with. I wish I had taken that approach. So when I started our company in 2013, I had a business partner that we've been friends since middle school. So I had someone else to speak with or talk
Mm-hmm.
to and kind of jump ideas around with. But my biggest regret, to your comment, is I wish I had either joined a team or I wish I had hired a coach or a mentor on day zero, because
Yeah.
I mean, it was part of also, I was a little younger than I am now. So it was part of that,
Right.
ego mentality, but I was like, I
Yeah.
can do it. It's so easy, like
Not
whatever.
rocket
And
science.
then
These
you
guys
get
are all done
into
it.
it. Yeah. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is like a legit business and we're going to
Yeah.
have to figure this out.
Far more
So
complicated than I anticipated.
yeah, much more complicated and complex, and like every aspect is you doing it, right? So my biggest regret, and for anyone listening, is if you're struggling or if you're deciding if you want to be in real estate, period, little bit different. We won't talk about the environment we're in now, but a little bit different environment to maybe pick this industry today. But
Mm-hmm.
I would have we got a coach like a year or two after, which was great and
Yeah.
completely changed the trajectory. But that was always my biggest regret. And I believe like wholeheartedly that I lost tens of thousands of dollars, not to mention started
Yeah.
losing my hair earlier than I needed to by not
All
doing
that.
it. Because
Yeah.
there's no point. It's real estate, it's a business, it's lead gen, marketing, sales, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
there have been people that are doing this that are very good at it, that are teaching you how to do it, and that can expedite your progression
Yeah.
5 to 10 years in 1 year by just focusing in on it.
I think I had the sense early enough on that I really needed to go deep before I went wide. And I had the sense that I needed to perfect one thing and systematize it before I moved on to another. So admittedly, I didn't hire a coach right out of the gate, even as I was a new agent
You're the team.
starting off on my
That's
own.
Yeah, you already had an advantage over me, right? Because you were on
Yeah.
a team. Maybe it wasn't the perfect environment or, what a
Yeah.
coach would provide, but that's a leg up in my opinion.
But I think it was in my second year on my own that I did. I just wanted to get some of these preliminary, solutions in place and have a little bit of automation and systematization. But yeah, certainly
Right.
by my second year independent, I think that would have been 2011, somewhere in that range for sure. I had coaches, and it'd be a very unusual year since then that I didn't have a coach of some sort. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, before we get into kind of like, I know you have a very impressive team up in Canada. Before we get into that, though, let's just focus on the team that you're on uh, when you first started. Where did you get? Because a lot of people in, all over Facebook, all over the internet, online right now
Mhm.
are like, where are the leads coming from? How do I get leads? I'm hearing stories from people that are new to the industry saying, I just closed my first lead and I've been a new agent for 9 months.
Yeah.
So this is big right now. I'm just curious. I know this was a decade or more ago, but when you first got into the industry and did join this team, where did your lead gen, where did your business come from?
Yeah, great question. So, my first wife, who I was married to at that time, was a faculty member at the University of Lethbridge, and we were, a successful young couple. And so, I had a big network of people at the University of Lethbridge, and so my hope was that I could lean on some of those folks. And so, I did make pretty tremendous efforts to communicate with them and let them know that I was in the business, and I leveraged the assets and the reputation of the team that I was on to build credibility around what it was that I was doing. And so I did generate a reasonable amount of business on my own. And I also was privileged enough to receive some opportunities from my team leader at that point. And so my vision for being on the team, and I still recommend that people do this, I looked at the fact that I was on a 50-50 split across the board, and I realized that there were efficiencies that this gentleman had built into his business that would cost me more to build. And so I really didn't think about leaving that team until 65% of the business was generated by my work. So
Right.
I was building out my own website and I was building out my own CRM. And back in those days, I was running ads on Kijiji. Facebook wasn't really a thing yet. It's a bit of the Wild West, and it wasn't super easy to generate business there just yet.
Yeah.
And so that was really how I did it. Was mostly through my sphere of influence. I did loads and loads of open houses. I did that for many years.
Yeah.
Typically like 2 open houses a day on a weekend, and just try to generate some opportunities that way. Door knocking,
Yeah.
cold
So
calling
you
wasn't.
generated, you started with your sphere like a lot of people do, and I highly recommend just because it's free and you know the people you know. Is that where your first going back to your first actual deal? That's where that came from. It was a referral that you had followed up with, door knock. Like, how did
No, very
you come
first deal
up?
was a gentleman by the name of Jim Gervin. And it was a phone number that I received from my team leader, somebody that was a sign call on a listing in a little town called Fort Macleod, about 45 minutes away. Listing was, I think, $135,000. My paycheck was like under 1,000, and I was
Yeah,
thrilled. Like that was.
yeah, that's awesome.
I had no idea what I was doing. So no, that the first deal that I got was definitely from my team leader. I think I did 16 my first year, and I think it's fair to say, probably 12 of those, 13 of those were from my team leader in the first year. It wasn't until my second year that I would say a lot of business started coming in because keep in mind that first year was part time. And so I
Hmm.
was still with my employer, so I didn't feel it appropriate to actively solicit a lot of business that way.
Right,
The second year I could, and then a lot more business came in kind of the latter half of that year. But it really wasn't until the third year where I really started to get that momentum, and people really had the sense that I was a reliable source of real estate information and somebody capable of doing the work. And so yeah, it
yeah,
takes a minute. We often say that your first year you'll feel like an imposter, your second year you're starting to feel like a realtor, but it's your third year where things will really start to kick. And by that 37th month, you can really depend on a lot of repeat referral business, sphere of
right.
influence business, all that kind of business that you really hoped was going to come year one, but you really had to wait it out.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but your current status, a lot of your business coming from your sphere referral still, or are you also doing some paid? And we can get into this a little. I still want to kind of talk about your early years first, but
Yeah.
do you have a breakdown of that you could share?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the bulk of our business, because we do so much, I mean, we're going to be around 700 transactions this year. The bulk of it's going to come from our marketing efforts. I would say our budget's broken out probably 50% PPC, probably 30% radio, 20% other,
Hmm.
so does that math add up? Yeah. Um, and partly the reason for that, we've had so much success with the types of leads that we generate, and our systems and automations, and even the culture of our organization, our prospecting and following up, really favors a high volume of lead, and we're able to get ourselves in a position where we don't have to make thousands and thousands of phone calls. We can really find high intent consumers. Don't
Hmm.
need an ISA team any longer. We've really got the system down pat. But the radio has been effective for a branding strategy, less and less effective year after year. So as that's happened, we've kind of replaced that with branded messages across social media channels, which
Gotcha.
would be encompassed in that 20%, as would be some targeting and remarketing, which we also consider to be kind of a branding strategy. But we don't really do much of anything, paper, billboards or bus benches, that sort of thing. At
Yep.
least in our market, there's not enough eyeballs on those things to justify them. We don't really have like highways where there's tens of thousands of cars a day that might justify some of the cost of those things.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
we're primarily in Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. Those are two cities about 2 hours apart. Lethbridge, where I live, is about 100,000 people. Medicine Hat's about 65,000. They're just smaller communities with very short drive times. It's like 7 minutes anywhere in either one of the cities, and a lot of older people. And so you get a lot of people still listening to the radio, and most younger people spending their time on social media. So we can kind of hit all the channels that we need to with keeping it fairly straightforward and simple.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I think you mentioned PPC. Interestingly enough, that's one of our top three also. We've been doing PPC for the last 6, 7 years,
Hmm.
but very high intent, dialed in campaigns.
Yeah.
We also do
Yeah.
direct mail too. We've been doing direct mail essentially since 2013, honestly. Same,
Yeah.
tweak the list, add to it, make
Yeah.
some changes, but kind of like the branding, they just, repetition top of mind sort of thing.
We've had success with direct mail as well. The challenge for us is that we can hit an entire city with one mail campaign. Um, I would say with addressed mail. I'm not talking about farming, but I'm talking about a letter to Bob with Bob's address. I mean, we don't get
Right.
that information directly. Of course, you lease it out. So we really try to limit that to maybe twice a year at the most.
Hmm.
And but definitely great opportunities for immediate business with a good call to action,
Right.
unquestionably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right, so let's go back just real quick, and then I really want to get into the mechanics of your current team today.
Sure.
But let's fill in the bridge or cross the bridge from you're on the team
Yeah.
as an agent, learning your rope. You did 16 deals your first year, which is awesome. I think I did 11 deals my first year, so kind of close in there, but it's just
Yeah.
really cool to have that under your belt.
Right.
What made you think of, hey, I want to do this on my own? And did that start as you as a solo, or did you, branch off and immediately start a team? Walk us through the genesis of your team. And
Hmm.
then going back to your prior career about the recruiting aspect, I'd love to hear your approach on that and how you built, A team players across the board here.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that I recognized fairly early on, and this was a lesson that I learned from my first team leader, was the value of an hour in my goal. And I didn't really understand that concept before, but I soon realized that if I was doing $10 an hour work or work that I could hire out for $20, then it would be very difficult for me to become a $100 an hour guy.
Right.
And so that was kind of a really important lesson. And I understood that and began using that very regularly. And because I was thinking about that so early on, it didn't really seem risky to me to bring in admin person or other staff. So I kind of had that working for me, just this general acceptance of the idea that I would be leveraging other people's time to be able to do more high dollar work and serve more people ultimately.
Right.
The other thing that I would say that's been pretty key to my success is just being in a position to just say yes and just let the universe deliver the goods and really understand that what if you say yes in one way or another it's going to sort itself out, and sometimes sorting itself out means that you're going to learn incredibly painful lessons and nearly go broke.
Yeah.
And I've been there and I've done that, and I'm at peace with that, and I'm at peace with that potentially happening again because it's made my life interesting, it's made my life fulfilling, and it's given me challenges that have really helped me grow. So the first example would be, it was my first year full time. I believe maybe it was my second year, and my broker came to me and said, "Hey, listen, like you look really busy. My son-in-law is getting his real estate license, and you look like you could use a buyer's agent." And so I'm thinking back to MREA and thinking, well, if my broker says that I should do this, I guess I should. And so I just said, okay, cool, let's do it.
Yeah.
Now, retrospectively, it was premature and there's a few other things that I might have changed about it, but it was fine for the time and I didn't know any better.
Mhm.
And you can't expect to make really sophisticated decisions when you don't have a really sophisticated understanding of the business and the challenges that you're about to face. And so I just created a straightforward 50-50 split and began passing this person opportunities. And then there was enough opportunity for another person and then another person. And then, pretty quickly we were at about 5 agents without really trying too hard. And something happened at that time that I think, I wouldn't describe it as being catastrophic, but I think it felt catastrophic at the time. And what happened was that I had 2 staff people, 2 paid people, and about 5 agents on the team. And I was still in production, but easing out. Running the team. We had a CRM by this point and a good marketing campaign. We're on the radio and lots of opportunity, lots of business, and by a long shot, the biggest team in our city.
Mhm.
But the market shifted. There were some changes in legislation and interest rate qualification criteria and this sort of thing that made it much more difficult for buyers to get into the market. And just like that, things dried up. And so I had
Were you buyer heavy? Sorry to interrupt. Were you buyer heavy at that point? So this legislation affected your your
Yeah,
business?
about 60% at that point would have been buyer business for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, from a revenue standpoint, it would have been about 50-50 because we charged more commission on the listing side. But yeah, it would have been about 60% of the deals that we did were from buyers. And my agents kind of came to me with their hands out, like, hey, fix this problem. And I'm like, man, we all got problems around here. Like I'm
Yeah.
still spending all this money and you guys are making money, but I'm not. And
Yeah.
truth wise, this one particular day, there's only one person still in the team from this time. We kind of refer to it as Black Wednesday, where I came to the team and I was like, okay, I got three solutions. One, we'll increase our commission on the listing side. Two, we'll charge a transaction fee. And three, we'll create some accountability about prospecting in the CRM, and you'll just get more business because there's leads in there that we're not dealing with.
Right.
And the team at that point just flat out refused. They're like, if you do any of those things, we're quitting. And so I thought, man, like, I really got a big problem here. Like, these
Yeah.
people just want me to spend more money. Like, they're not
Right.
in this to support me in any way. And they don't care that I'm going broke here. And I think it was $3,600 in the bank, a $15,000 bill coming due here, I think for payroll and a few other things in about 2 weeks. So I had to borrow 10 grand from my mother-in-law.
Oh man.
Uh, yeah, to make my payroll. And so we cobbled it all together and got through it. But I realized in that time that I really had two options. One was to massively scale my business and create a lot more insulation from a few people deciding to walk out the door over frivolous reasons, or to scale back and create a structure where I was going to be less exposed. I would still be the key man,
Mhm.
but there would be more salaried people. There'd be less splits, more of a micro team model with showing partners and additional admin people with me, doing the bulk of the heavy lifting of relationship management and so forth. And I really didn't want to get back to kitchen tables. I wasn't more keen to go back and do more buyer deals or seller deals. And so I opted for the other option, which was to scale massively and literally just started creating videos. Like literally within the week, I started creating videos saying that we had ample opportunities and that we were hiring. And a few people reached out, and I realized that, hey, one of the barriers to entry at that point was income transition. So I created an opportunity for income earning while they were doing my boot camp, offered to pay for their tuition during the real estate course, and just kind of knocked down the barriers to
Yeah.
success. And in doing so over the past, it's been about 8 years now, we've really perfected this boot camp. And now that's become one of the key offers through our coaching company that we support people with and
Cool.
coach other teams in creating and, in fact, using a white labeled version of our boot camp. And it's been absolutely, just a complete change in our lives and completely changed the joy that we have for the business, because it's created more opportunity for more people. We've opened more markets, but it's also insulated us from so much risk, just having more people around us. And then ultimately, when you're bringing people into your organization on a regular basis, you have the chance to continually lift up the culture that you're working at building, which in our case is the culture of prospecting, a culture of inclusion, a culture of support, a culture of
Mhm.
positivity, a culture of love. And in that, we've just had more joy. And for me, that's a key part now. I mean, sure, we make money, but I'm 48 years old. I've got young children. Like, I don't want to come to work and not have a good time anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've done that. I'm good. Like, I would do something else completely different if that was the way that it was.
Right.
And fortunately, it's fun. So we keep going, right?
Yeah, that's such a cool story, man. I have a similar story around like our first hires. You had mentioned like the splits. And another reason why I think it's very important to get a mentor or coach early on, because at that point for us, it was, we want people, we want teammates, so we have to offer them really, really attractive splits. But as a business owner, kind of like you mentioned, it's you can do a lot of business and not be making any money or losing money when you really start to peel back the onion and look into the P&L, when you have like a massively growing cost of goods sold line item, for example. But we kind of learned the hard way, honestly, and we got down to four figures in the bank as well, because we were trying to get teammates and trying to grow the team. But what happens when you have two people, then three, then four, then five, and they have families and they need to support themselves? So
That's
we
right.
just had to keep spending more and more money, honestly, for lead gen, right?
Hmm.
And that hurt us. And our splits were, they were hurting us. So we ultimately had to renegotiate, and it was difficult to do, but we made it
Hmm.
through it. But we were like, listen, man, talking to anyone on the team, hey, we made a mistake. We're not going to be in business in 6 months if we keep having to give you, 60 cents to every dollar on your commission or whatever it was with whoever it was. So
Yep.
that's a big part, but that's such an awesome story that you got through it, right?
And I'll just kind of put a little sub note here to what you said. And one of the things that's consistently frustrated me over the years is kind of like this flat response that coaches give to agents or team leaders in different markets. And the truth is that like in my market, the average commission is 1.9%. The average house price at that time was under $300,000. Like the business model that works in this market is different from the business model that works in a place where the commission's 3% and the average house price is 800,000. Like maybe in that market, you can do a 60% split to your agent
Right.
because
Yeah.
the cost of an employee, maybe only moderately higher, your ad spend may be similar. And so I just find kind of as a coaching industry, it seems like not enough attention is paid to these sorts of things. Like what is
Yeah.
the local cost of providing value as a team leader? And then how do we generate that revenue? And what
Hmm.
do our splits need to be in order to afford to do that?
Right.
And so that's something that I'm always conscious of. And I wish somebody had that conversation with me because
I
I had
know.
a flat 50-50 across the board. And we did exactly what you did and had to move to a 65% to the company on a listing because there was just so much overhead and cost of doing it.
Yeah.
And we were quite able to justify it after the fact, but you're right. It was a very difficult transition.
Yeah. One of the big major shifts that we did around revenue share and commission splits that was a tremendous help to the company. And of course, you want teammates that also want to see the company grow so they can grow, right? Company
Mm-hmm.
can't grow and they can't just be the only ones growing if
Yeah.
you don't both in certain situations make changes. But
Yeah.
what we did is we started taking flat percentages off the top to help cover that overhead, which
Mm-hmm.
allowed us to continue to feed their pipeline in our company. And I'd love to get into your current team in just a second. But in our company, the way our model worked was we paid for all the marketing, all the systems, all the overhead. And
Mm-hmm.
we had an ISA team of three or
Mm-hmm.
four ISAs working around the clock. Our agents just went on appointments. So they
Mm-hmm.
literally, other than they had to pay for their own NAR dues and fees, but they had next to no out-of-pocket recurring expenses like the company did. So that
Yeah.
made it a little bit easier for us to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But we just gave them appointments. They would go on appointments, work it, and then they had a support staff that we paid for
Yeah.
helping them when they went under contract. So it was really like we wanted them to focus on the client and on the presentation and signing new business.
Yeah, and if an agent, leaves a team like that thinking that they're going to find it easier on their own, they've really got another thing coming.
Right,
Like
right.
even in our organization, our agents do their own prospecting and following up. We've tried many different permutations and combinations of inside sales,
Hmm.
and from local to foreign to in multiple countries, and it's not for lack of training or effort. It's literally just not something that's going to work in the type of market that we're in, just due to commission compression, due to the price point. Like we
Yeah,
just can't generate enough additional business to justify. And so
right,
the
right.
only way that's going to work for us is to have this culture of prospecting and provide agents with great automations, great support, and a database administrator that's going to help them highlight opportunities and kind of point them in the right direction,
Hmm.
keep them connected to what's going on in their CRM from a cursory level, but not actually do that work, not actually set the appointment. That's
Right.
in the agent's control. And so it does, in one way, provide like a lower level of service. But I also recognize that that's not something that the agent's going to be able to afford to do competitively against us in the marketplace either, because they're still competing at the
Yeah,
same price point, at the same commissions, right?
yeah.
So in that way, it's not like anybody else is doing that. It's just not pragmatic. It's not possible given the budget. But that's tremendous. Like if you had any turnover with a model like that, it's surprising. I mean, I know you would have, but
Yeah, I mean, just because circumstances, people move, like different
yeah,
things like that. But yeah, that's our model. That's what we've been sticking to almost
yeah,
since like obviously in the early onset, I was the ISA and the appointment setter and the
yeah.
agent, the
It's an
transaction
important
coordinator. But
skill.
as we grew, that's just the model that we learned, adopted, built our platform system
Yeah.
to, plug and play that kind of stuff with the automation around it. But
Hmm.
Yeah, that's just, to each his own. Yours sounds awesome. Also, one thing about like working Sphere and referrals makes the conversion a little bit easier, but the cost a lot lower, right?
Yeah.
So a referral is almost essentially no cost other than, keeping in touch with, I don't know if you do like events or anything like that, but I will say I wish we had also paid more attention to our client base because we closed a lot of clients and helped families like buy and sell year
Mm,
after year after year. But we continued to focus on the paid marketing generation vehicles. So it was almost transactional,
yeah.
where I wish if we had, after the, first 5 years, 600, 700, 800, whatever, how many families and people we worked with, one referral from half of them a year would be a pretty good business, a standalone business, I should
Yeah.
say. So
Yeah.
that's also, other than not hiring a coach or getting a mentor right away, that's also a thing I think will help really keep your costs down.
The challenge with it, though, I mean, and I consistently find this with my coaching clients, is that it's it's generally a marketing, uh, a marketing business run by the team leader, and a lot of
Yeah.
times the team leader is still in production. And the unfortunate reality is that as you've done more and more past business, it becomes more and more sophisticated to have those email campaigns to create that content to ensure that your delivery is high enough. And so
Yep.
many people just let that go because this other thing just keeps happening, right?
Yeah.
And this other easy business, you're right, like with a few events and with a few phone calls and a few text messages and yes, some automations, you can
Hmm.
generate a tremendous amount of opportunity. But the unfortunate thing is that it is much more hands-on. And as the marketing director, i.e. team leader, i.e. lead listing specialist, it just becomes one of those things that most will let go of
Right.
in lieu of recruiting more agents, training agents, answering questions, and making sure that the buttons are all pressed on the PPC or whatever it is else that they're doing that's
Exactly.
much more simple and hands off, right?
Yeah, honestly, I wish we had the foresight to do both really, really well. We focused
Mm-hmm.
on the latter for us was, the continuing to do the transactional paid
Yeah.
lead gen type, but who knows? You know, hindsight is 2020 when you're looking back, but that's still kind of how we operate today.
Yeah.
With a referrals not being as built out as I would probably like, but you know, it's just the
Yeah.
way we're used to it and it's been working for us. So we're like, why mess with something?
Yeah. And I think it's like anything. I mean, you wouldn't find a team leader on this planet who doesn't have something in their business that they're wanting to improve. You
Hmm.
know, from the outside, every business looks amazing. And then when you're the owner of it, you feel like everything's broken because that's just the way things are. There's always something to improve.
Right.
It's either you or it's a system or it's, support that you could be giving people in your team. And there's always a need. And there's only so much of you and there's only so many resources to go around. We're not, all fed by VC funds and we're not Fortune 100 companies. We're all, for the most part, small time entrepreneurs with small businesses. And in that way, you have to make decisions with limited resources where you're going to maximize your opportunities. And while they may not be the optimal, best long-term solutions, a lot of times we're trying to solve short-term problems, right?
Right.
And so in doing so, a lot of times you make the short-term decision that may not be the best thing long-term, but you know that it's going to continue to solve a short-term problem on the ongoing basis.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, at the time, you either don't have the experience or, the foresight to see what making a decision in 2020 will ultimately lead to in 2023. And then you're like, why the heck did I do that? But then you
Mm-hmm.
learn that's part of gaining experience and how you're coaching your team along to be
Yeah.
better themselves. Right. And that's what you can part of, you know, the reason why we're so adamant about talking about coaches or mentors, right?
Yeah.
Because they've gone through all this and made all these mistakes. So you don't, so, the future coming behind us doesn't have to, right?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and I've had coaches, but the other unfortunate reality is that in most cases, the coaches that I was working with either had not been in the business at the time or hadn't been doing it at the level that I was. And I think, in my view, for many of those early years, I had the sense that, well, because they're working with other people that are faced with these challenges a little further down the road than I am, then I'll be getting the benefit of that. But looking back, I wish that I had approached it differently and been maybe a bit more vigilant about trying to find people that were just 3 years down the road, 2 years down the
Yeah,
road, 1 year down the road from where I was, because you just have a sense of the emotion and why you might like to make this choice. And it's just so much easier to have somebody speak to you in your language saying, hey, you know what, I know that looks good, but here's the two things that you might consider. Not saying don't do it, but just think about this. And if you decide that you'd still like to, well, now you've made a decision fully informed. But if not, then let's
yeah,
talk about this other avenue. And those were things that I didn't have by virtue of not having the right kind of coaching. And the truth is that I know for facts that I've wasted over $1 million at least. I mean, I had 1 year in the last 5 where I spent 250 grand doing some things with staffing, ISAs that just went poof. Like it literally just didn't ROI a dollar.
yeah,
And like that's a lot of money. That was in a 12-month span, right?
yeah. That's
And so if you
crazy.
go back 15 years and just ask yourself, yeah, the numbers are huge. And so I think
Oh
that's a
yeah, I'm sure we have something similar along those
Mhm.
lines. Yeah, it's always another thing that I've kind of learned over the last decade plus with our kind of like mentioned you're potentially not having the right coach, but there will be a point where, I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to be the dumbest person in the room and then work my way up to the smartest and graduate out of that program. So we've had a lot of different coaches, which were all great. Won't really say anything bad about any of them, but there does come a point where, loyalty aside, relationship aside, you're like, hey, I'm on stage now all the time teaching all these people. I want to be learning from the guy up on stage doing 10x, 20x from what I'm doing, because that's how you truly scale and grow.
Yeah, it's true. It's interesting about that because I think something that happens, and I don't know if this is a me thing or if it's kind of an everyone thing, but I never really grew up picturing myself doing the kinds of things that I'm doing. This would have been very big to me as a kid. I'm from a small town of 2,000 people, and even now when I kind of look around, I think, man, like this life seems a little bit confusing. It's not like I have my own jet or anything, but we have a lot of privilege and a lot of opportunity that I never saw happening for me. And I think sometimes your subconscious can play tricks on you about what rooms you deserve to be in and what rooms you should be in, who
Right.
you should be looking to, and where you deserve to be. And I know that's a challenge that I've been faced with over the years. And so I try to constantly remind myself of that while still being humble. I'm like you, I'm a lifelong learner, and man, there's things that I'm learning every day. And I'll tell you straight, like I learn a lot of stuff from my 7 and 9 year old on a daily basis. And so it's not that there's a limit to where you can learn. It's just a question of, are you willing to? And so I think
Right.
you're right. If you're asking yourself those questions and you're in the right places and looking to the right people, there's lots available for you for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the concept of lifelong learning, I study a lot of, CEOs and follow a lot of successful business owners. And one of the key parts is they're always reading, always learning, always networking and meeting people that have done what they're trying to do. There's
Mm-hmm.
honestly, and you'd be surprised, like going up to someone doing, 250 million in volume a year and asking them for help. I used to get intimidated and be like, oh, they're not going to talk to me. There's big wig and I'm scared to go talk to them. They're honestly more open than the agents not doing a lot of business that think they need to keep all their
You're
trade secrets.
100%
There's a
right.
very different mindset that I've learned, especially over the past 3 years, as I've started to really, take education and networking and relationship building amongst our peers seriously. And it's that successful people are successful because they want other people to be successful. They're not trying to hide anything. And,
Yeah.
that's just the truth. And you'd be really surprised for those that are like intimidated to send an email to Courtney later asking him a question,
Yeah.
or me or whoever. Just do it. They're more often you'll be surprised of who responds and is willing to help out.
It's so true. The number of times that I've been on stage or been on podcasts. I'll give you an example. I was at a conference back in October and I was speaking to a room of about 5 or 6,000 people. I gave my cell phone out from the stage. Do you know how
Yeah,
many texts I got after?
yeah, I could imagine.
3.
Oh, really? I'm
Yeah.
sure. I honestly, I think it's that it not saying the 4,900 people were intimidated, but they were maybe a little hesitant because they're like, oh no, he's not going to talk to me.
Or he's going to be too
And
busy to
did
get
you
back to me.
respond to those three
And I'm like,
people?
yeah, well, yeah, of course I did. I mean,
Yeah,
I offered coaching calls to each of them. I think that happened actually. And, of course, no fee because I know what it's like to ask somebody for help. And
yeah,
you're wondering, like, are they just trying to be nice to look good for others, And,
right,
and the truth is like, man, I got a lot of bad advice and I made a lot of mistakes. And I just know that pain. Like, I mean, when you've been nearly broke as many times as we have been, man, you really don't want that for people.
right.
And you just really wish that there were others that were prepared to share. And so you're either going to become that kind of person, or I think you're just going to be kind of bitter inside. And for me, like I didn't want that. I wanted to be successful and I wanted to be happy. And
Right.
when you can kind of combine those things, giving information away is not scary at all. In fact, it feels really good.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because I know the other side of that, right?
I honestly, personally, for me, I love sharing. I just love sharing. I mean, the information, it's not like it's not rocket science, right? Like the
Right.
biggest thing, honestly, if we're being like really candid here, is like consistency. That's the biggest thing. You're obviously don't put out bonehead marketing copy, but if you see what's out there, nothing, everything is Googleable. You can Google
Mhm.
anything and figure it out, right?
Yep.
There's nothing that I can't find online for free, but you'd be surprised too. Even if you give away free information, at the very end of the day, who, regardless of who you're talking to, I'm talking to, anyone, it's execution, right?
Mhm.
You can say, hey,
Yep.
man, here's a 7-figure business model. Here, read these 100 pages. And there might be a lot of information in there, but if that person you're handing that to doesn't do anything with it, you can
It
lead a
falls
horse
on.
to water, but you can't make him drink. It's the same thing. So I'm
Yeah.
happy to share anything, and I want to see people do it
Yeah.
and go out and implement, even if it's just one out of 100 things. Maybe someone listening to this today picks up on one thing and does it, and it changes their life. We may never know, but it's just cool knowing that that's a possibility.
Yeah, and it's rewarding in a sense to be able to have contributed to that. Not to say that you wear it as a badge of honor for your ego or anything, but the truth is that a lot of advice goes unutilized, right? And when you've been through that pain yourself and you realize that, hey, you did put the time in, you did stay consistent. It's just that you didn't know what you were doing most of the time.
Right.
Had I had that consistency and the time on task with better knowledge, like where could I have been now? And so you're just trying to save other people from those mistakes, and to see people not take that action and to not implement it or to not be consistent with it or to try it for a minute and then flip over to something else. It is frustrating, but it doesn't stop the giving. It just makes it all the more rewarding when you see it work, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And for us, it was just like early on, we would do like some sort of an effort marketing wise, and then we'd get all this business and stop, but we wouldn't be consistent with it. So we'd go like this constantly until we
Mhm.
really learned, like, hey, that one, and you mentioned, I forget the name, but like pre-Facebook, Kajibi or something like that.
Okay, we had Kijiji, yeah, we still do,
GG.
yeah,
We used Craigslist
yeah,
actually early on, this is back in 2013. I didn't even know Facebook was like a place to go to talk to people for lead gen, but that's what we did. But we would put something out and get deals and then forget somehow. This sounds kind of stupid, but we'd be like, where's our next deals? We're like, where are the leads? Where are the leads? And we're like, oh, we're not doing Craigslist ads anymore. Why
I
did
know.
we stop? And it was like silly to look back and think about now, but that
And
was
like, why wouldn't we just have put a reminder in our calendars, like once every 2 weeks, to go refresh the ad or something? Or
yeah, as simple as that. Like a few clicks that would take like 30 seconds to refresh an ad. But it was just like, I didn't know. And you're so at that point too, I didn't really realize the importance of having like what we call playbooks now, or SOPs for
Mhm.
everyone listening. We didn't have that. So we're kind of like reinventing how we handled the same situation over and over, but differently every single time. And that was a massive, massive time suck. So
Yeah,
we were focusing on that part of it and then neglecting this part. And then we would focus on this part and neglect that part. And then it took us a while to kind of realize that.
yeah,
And honestly, it took our coaches to be like, dude, why are you turning off this lead source that you're closing 8 deals a month from? Like,
right,
why?
yeah.
Can you explain
Or
that?
or like the basic concept of bringing in team members, and like I can recall just wanting people to be themselves, And I remember hearing from one of our coaches, like, why don't you have the language, this is just the way we do things? And I remember thinking, well, because that's going to like quash people's personalities.
Yeah.
But as I sat with that more, I realized that that was just a different way of wording SOPs. Like,
Hmm.
clients have the right to expect consistent service from a variety of different agents at the same team.
Right.
And I really hadn't created systems for that to happen. And I hadn't created accountability measures for that either. And so by extension, our clients were having much different experiences. And the other unintended consequence was that agents felt very independent, like they were kind of running their own
Siloed.
business
Yeah.
within the team. And then when you go
Yeah.
to ask them to do something, they throw their hands in the air and say, well, what right do you have to tell me what to do? And it's like, well, because I've paid for everything. And I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just trying to suggest that this is a best practice, like,
We ran into that too. And it's what? It's quality control. And then it's how do you fix it? But if I'm doing something one way and you're doing something one way and John's doing something another way, you can't really triage or figure out what happened or what went wrong. So when we started implementing the SOP kind of concept and saying like, hey, if you have to order a yard sign, and we literally wanted an SOP for every single thing. So if I went down and I was supposed to order yard signs every time, someone could just come in, access it through the library and be like, oh, call this number, say this, do that. And then it gave them the 80% solution. We didn't do like super detailed, like 100% because
no,
change and, whatever.
yeah,
But
the
that's
80%
how you're
SOP is
also
where
like,
it's at.
the yard sign didn't get ordered. Well, what happened? And if you don't have systems or processes codified or written out anywhere, and everyone on the team kind of buying into that, that's when it kind of turns into chaos. And you don't want that happening when there's an urgency on the line, right? Where you're at the
Mhm.
closing table and something happens. That's how these businesses kind of stand above the rest from a branding perspective.
Yeah,
Kind of like you go to another business and there's someone answering the phone that seats you at a restaurant, that comes and takes your order, that cooks your food. That's the level of professionalism I think real estate clients deserve. They want to
it's
know
true.
that there's a process. Hey, you just went under contract. Mandy's going to take care of you. This is what
That's
she's going
right.
to do. I'll be involved, but she's going to do this. As she's awesome. She's going to make sure we get to the closing table. If anything comes up, feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
So I wholeheartedly agree with having that in place. I think it's a big thing. I wish I had very early on.
If agents would just do that, if they would just prepare their clients for what's coming up, what to expect,
Expectation setting, another
right?
brainiac idea. Like it's so simple, but a lot of people don't do it. But it postures them and gets them ready to say, "Oh, I'm not getting passed off." Right?
Hmm.
This is just part of Courtney's,
Yeah.
MO, and this is
You
how his
could
team
send
operates.
anybody over. You could make anybody phone as long as they anticipate it and know what it's for. You're creating a wonderful experience. It's the
Yeah,
confusion that really causes
yeah. Why not
consternation.
afford that to every customer you work with?
Yeah.
And every customer should get the same one. There shouldn't be, bias amongst your customers as
Yeah.
well. But this
Yeah.
has been really fantastic, Courtney. I've learned a lot from you. I almost wish we could do like a part two. Maybe we'll talk
Yeah.
offline later about
Yeah,
what
that'd be
team
awesome. I
model
know
on
there's
it.
lots more to unpack, and
Yeah.
I know you're doing such great work, man, with your company and with this podcast. Thanks for having me on and just give me a chance to chat and share some ideas. But yeah, if you'd like to go deeper one time, just let me know. That'd be great.
Yeah, I might take you up on that offer. We'll talk later. But Courtney, again, thank you so much for your time. If anyone is up in Canada listening to this or thinking about moving there, how would one get in touch with you? And we'll include this in the episode description that I will have on the channel. But
Mhm.
how can people get in touch?
Yeah, easiest way is go to my link tree, which is just linktr.ee/follow Courtney, Courtney. All my links are there. So hit me up on social, send me a DM. You can schedule some time with me if you'd like,
Cool.
whatever. I would love to connect with your audience and be a support to them any way that I can.
Awesome. That's great. Well, again, man, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And
Thanks, man.
take
Good to
care.
connect. Take care.
Bye.